Awesome. Thanks, Derek. Derek, would you mind giving me the ability to share screen? I forgot
Absolutely.
to ask you that before. Thank you. Hi, all. My name's Adam Jesperson. I'm the Associate Director with the Montana Nonprofit Association. And thank you. I feel honored that you're giving me a couple evenings of your time to learn Microsoft Excel. This is not going to be, it's going to be some show and tell. Like I'll be doing most of the work here, but we're not looking at PowerPoint slides or anything like that. We're going to dive in and do work in Excel. You have the exercise file. It's in the chat and it was emailed to you before. I'm going to share my screen. We're going to kind of go through step by step on some things. If you have two screens available, I encourage you to pull up the exercise file on your side and work right in tandem with me. How this will work is that we're going to do our work in this file today, and then again on Thursday we're just going to pick it up and keep going. And then when we're done at the end of Thursday, we're going to have a worksheet in Excel that looks pretty different than what we started with tonight and what you received earlier today. So, and I'm going to email that file back to Dara to send back to you all. So you're going to have the pre-file and the post file. So you're going to be able to make sure that you've got something that looks like it should. And then you've got a sandbox. You've got a place to play around and do some work and mess around with Excel to practice the skills that we're going to work on here. The best way to learn this is to practice yourself. So we can teach concepts and teach, what to click where and what this does, but the best way to learn is to dig in yourself. A little background on me. I'm with the Montana Nonprofit Association. I do a number of trainings and consulting. I do a lot of in the financial area where we build a lot of spreadsheets. And from that, it kind of came up like people were saying, hey, you've got some pretty cool spreadsheets. Do you do a training like this? So we've done some statewide and even national training on Excel. And Dara said, hey, I think our folks could use some of this too. So she set this up, brought us to this place. We're excited to spend some time together just walking through Excel. We're going to start kind of at the beginning, what I would call 101. I think to ground me, if you guys could be so bold, either in the chat or if you wanted to turn your camera on and use fingers, I'd like to know what's your comfort level with Excel. 1 being, I'm pretty intimidated by it. I don't do much with it at all. And I'm here to learn the basics. 10 being, move over, I could teach this class. Where are you all using Excel? Just so I know how fast we need to move through some things. 1 to 10, either in the chat or give me a 1 to 10, a 2. Cool. 5 to 6, 4. Okay. Some other thoughts? Jamie, also welcome to the M&A board, by the way. I haven't had a chance to meet you. Yeah, great to have you here. A 4, okay. 5, and I didn't give you any, a 5 to you might mean it's something different to me, but this is helpful. 4 or 5, so we've got some familiarity. I'm not gonna start with the very, very beginning, or maybe I will, but we're gonna move pretty quickly through that and try to get to some more functions and some higher order things tonight. And then Thursday is going to be all about charts and graphs and pivot tables and visualizations and kind of the fun stuff we can do in Excel. So you're going to have this recording also when we're done. So you're going to have the pre-file, post file, and a recording. So you're going to be set moving into the future. If you need to recall this information in 4 months or 6 months, and you're like, geez, I know there's a way to do this. Adam showed us how to do this, but I don't remember how. You've got the resources. I'm going to start sharing my screen and we're going to dive in. Also, please, chat's going to be the best way, I think, at this point to communicate. So I do not want to leave anybody behind as we work through this. So if you're trying to work alongside me and I'm going too fast, I've been told that I do that. So if that is happening, please in the chat say, hey, can you do that again? Or what did you just do? Or whatever it might be, please be so bold as to say, hey, can you show me that one more time? Or what was that click? Or what was that button? We want to make sure that everyone is keeping up with us here as we go through this. So you should be seeing my screen. This is the exercise file that you were sent today. The first tab, which we're going to talk about tabs here, shows our agenda, what we're going to cover tonight. Hopefully try to get through all this tonight. We're here for about 90 minutes, here till 7 o'clock. We're going to talk what is Excel really quickly. We're going to go over the structure of an Excel workbook, what that looks like, how to navigate the Excel interface just in general. We're going to talk about entering, formatting, and organizing data. What are the best ways to do that so that you have you can recall and analyze data well. We're going to talk about cell references. It's kind of the foundation for using functions and formulas, which we're going to get to. What is a cell reference? We're going to talk about lists and manipulating lists of data, sorting and filtering, working with lists, sort, filter, find, replace, freeze, panes. We'll talk about what that is. And then we're going to start to dive into functions. What is an Excel function? How does it work? How do we think about that? And then introduce some basic functions tonight. If we can get through that, we're going to be in a good place for Thursday. That might be a tall order, so we're going to go at the pace that we need to go at. And we're going to get as far as we can get. And if I need to record something extra just on my own and send that out to Dara to send to you, I can do that too. So we'll get all the content, whether it's in this 90 minutes or these 2 90-minute sessions or a little bit extra. We'll make sure we're there. Sound good? Okay. So first of all, what is Excel? Excel is, at this point, the largest and most widely used software program for organizing, storing, and manipulating data. It used to be that Excel kind of had some limitations on the amount of data you could put into something, so it wasn't great as a database because you couldn't put massive amounts of data into it. So you had other services or software programs like Access or Python or R, or these other things that people use and there are uses for those beyond Excel, but one of the major limitations of Excel was you couldn't put a lot of information into it. Now, Excel can handle in a single Excel file, can handle pretty much as much data as your computer can store on its computer, on its hard drive. So it is the most ubiquitous tool for utilizing data, analyzing, storing, and using data in the world. It's a Microsoft product. The file we're looking at here, I'm running Microsoft on a Mac. So what I'm seeing, what my screen looks like, might look slightly different than what you see on your screen if you have a Mac versus a PC. Also know that there are different versions of Excel. Just, we're all used to having to go buy the software and download it onto our computer, and then it's good for that window until they release a new one. Then you got to get that one. Now, most of this is cloud-based, so it's typically updated automatically. You may have a version of Excel that isn't what we have here, what we're showing here. I give you that to say if you are, if we're working with functions, manipulating the screen, moving around the screen, and you're not seeing the same buttons in the same place or the same things in the same place as I am, it's okay. It's there. It's just not probably. You have a different version, but I promise you it's all there. We're not doing anything in Excel that is like high enough order that it didn't exist in the previous versions of Excel, even though mine is kind of the latest, greatest. So don't be afraid. If you can't find it, that's a time to put in the chat, hey, what was that button? I don't see that. And we'll try to troubleshoot that. Also, before we start, I want to put out a notice. As we are working in this, oftentimes most of us have like the thing in Excel that we want to know how to do or need to know how to do for our work. I'm here for that as well. So after this course, if you have a specific need in Excel and you just need 10 or 15 minutes to show me something and figure out, well, how do I do that thing? Reach out to Dara and she can connect you with me, or I'll actually put my email in the chat here at the end of the course, end of the session tonight. And email me directly. I'm more than happy to hop on a Zoom call and spend some time with you looking over a spreadsheet that you have that is vexing to you and could be better or whatever it might be. I'm here for that as well. So that's a free offer for some limited time just to spend some time together walking through what you need. So I got sidetracked a little bit. What is Excel? It's for utilizing data. Within the Excel workbook, so what this file that we have here is called a workbook. A workbook is made up of one or more worksheets. This white space with this kind of grid pattern that I'm highlighting here is a single worksheet. Our worksheets are organized with the tabs here at the bottom. You can see that I've named them here. I have agenda. We're going to walk through these other sheets. Combined, these worksheets make up one workbook. A file, an Excel file that you open, is a workbook, and they're made up of multiple worksheets. This grid pattern that you see right here is in alphabetical order and numeric order. So every cell, every one of these boxes is called a cell. Every cell has a cell reference. That's a letter and a number combination. And that letter number combination, you can see it's alphabetical in columns, vertical columns, moving from left to right. A starts at A and it goes to XFD. So it goes from A to Z and then AA to AZ, all the way to XFD, which is thousands and thousands of columns that you can have working vertically. Also, rows then work from top to bottom, and horizontal rows from row 1 down to row 1 million. You can do the math on that, more than 1 million rows. So every individual worksheet in Excel has, multiply, I don't know, hundreds of columns times millions of rows for that many number of cells. And you can have as many worksheets within one workbook as your computer has hard drive storage on it. So a massive amount of data that we can store in Excel, that we can use in Excel, more than we could possibly throw in here. We're going to work with some relatively decent sized files or worksheets, data sets over these next 2 nights, but we're not even scratching the surface of the amount of information we can store in Excel. Just to give you some scale and perspective on what we're working with here. When you open up Excel, you see this kind of an interface. The bulk of all the information that we're going to put into Excel goes into this kind of grid pattern right here, which is our worksheet. Our commands, the things that we're going to use to manipulate, change, edit cells, edit rows, edit columns, are all found up here in the top in this taskbar right here, this toolbar. You'll notice that we have different options. We have home, which is going to give us a lot of our popular commands. We're going to spend some time here. You have insert. So this is where I think next or on Thursday, we're going to spend some time here where we can insert a pivot table. We can add pictures, like I added EP EDC's logo here, M&A's logo. Charts and graphs are over here. Comment boxes, text boxes to insert additional things into the worksheet. Some of you may have draw. If you have a current version of Excel, this is where I can actually draw with a pen if I want to, annotate this, mark it up. Page layout is all about what does this spreadsheet look like when I want to print it or save it as a PDF, make it static, so I can control the margins right here. I can control the orientation. Do I want to print hot dog or hamburger, portrait or landscape? What's the size that I want, letter, tabloid, etc. There's some ways to control what this looks like when it gets printed out. Formulas, we're going to spend some time here towards the end of tonight and on Thursday as well. This is when we're asking Excel to do work for us, do some analysis for us. There are pre-baked formulas in Excel that are, they're algorithms that you put in the arguments and it spits out the response. There are hundreds of functions, formulas that you could use. We're just going to scratch the surface on a few of those, but teach you how to use them in general so you feel comfortable exploring that space as you need to. Data, this is where we're going to remove duplicates to do some validation. Text to columns, we'll talk about that. We're not going to spend a lot of time here. Review is if we want to add some comments or lock down a worksheet. We don't want people to change it, so we want to lock it down so people can't edit it. View is just about what we see on the screen. Page layout is what we see if we print. View is what we see here. And most of us don't have the developer tab. This is for kind of higher order functions. So everything we need to do in Excel, we can find here. There's commands for it in this command bar, this toolbar right here. And we'll walk through that and navigate that. Below that then are 2 really important functions or pieces of an Excel worksheet. One is this name box right here that just gives you the reference of the cell in which your cursor can be found in. I still have my draw turned on. Get rid of that. So you can see right now the cell that's highlighted is this one right here, which is B18. I can see B18. As I move it around, my name box changes too, and as I click and drag, my name box changes as well. To the right of that is probably one of the most important pieces of Excel, which is the function bar right here, this guy right here. This shows us what's in that cell, which may be what I've typed into that cell. Like right here, it says, session 1 agenda. That's what's showing on the screen, showing on the worksheet, and what's also showing up here in the function bar, formula bar right here. However, if I have a function, if I have something else happening, if I'm asking Excel to do some analysis and spit out an answer, that analysis is going to be what shows up here in the function bar. And the answer to that is what's going to show up here in the cell. For example, if I type in equals, now I just told Excel, you've got to do some math. I'm not doing it for you. And I'm just going to say 2 plus 2 equals 2 plus 2. We know what that is. It's 4. The cell is going to show 4 as my answer. But if I look up here in the formula bar, you can see that it shows what I typed in, which is equals 2 plus 2. When we start to build functions towards the end of our time tonight, we're going to be building algorithms, building arguments up here in this bar that are going to give us answers in the cell. So this is where you're going to get a difference between what's showing and what's actually happening underneath the surface that Excel is working on, doing some work for us. Again, after that, then you've got your worksheet, which is a grid pattern right here, rows and columns, alphabetical columns, numeric rows. We've got our information. All right, good on that. That's kind of, high level, very quickly. How do we navigate Excel? You'll see there are a few things to note in the bottom. So we have all of our tabs here at the bottom that we've created for different worksheets. I can add more. Again, I told you could have an infinite number by clicking this little plus sign right here. And you can see I just created one. Now I have sheet 1 that just was created here. I could do that again, and I have sheet 2. If I want to rename this something, I just double click on sheet 2 and I say new sheet. There it is. It's got a new name now. I can click this and move it. I can move it and rearrange it in the order in which it is in the tab order. And if I end up with more sheets than I can see on the single screen, these little arrows right here are going to be activated, and I can scroll over to the right to find other sheets that I've created, scroll back over to the left to find those other sheets. So I can manage, you think about a book, you just kind of work through the tabs. That's what this is right here. If I want to delete this, I right click on the tab and I go up to delete and it's gone. I right click on the tab, go to delete, and it's gone right there. Hold on just 1 second. My children just showed up. I'm just going to get them lined out on something. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. Okay, so a couple other things that to note on the very bottom. The bottom right has our ability to zoom in and out, which please tell me if you can't see the numbers on the screen as we're working through this, tell me to zoom in, and I can, how to do that now. You can click right here and I can zoom my screen in to make things bigger pretty quickly. I can zoom out to make them smaller. Also, there's some quick math that Excel will always do in the very bottom right corner. So if I were to highlight a number of cells right here, these are just text cells, you can see that immediately Excel is saying, okay, you just highlighted 10 cells, count 10. If I were to highlight numbers, let's see, I'll do 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If I were to highlight numbers, it's going to say your count is 5. You've got 5 numbers. The sum of those is 20, and the average of those is 4. So you're always going to get some quick math just by highlighting certain cells. That's helpful for us if we're kind of in a working document and we don't want to have to run a formula. We can just kind of highlight them and say, yeah, this equals 567, whatever it might be. You're always going to get this quick math right down here in the bottom. Okay. We just covered what is Excel. We just covered the structure of a workbook. We're working through this. Formatting, entering, formatting, and organizing Excel data. So I'm going to go to a different tab here. If you'd like to do that on your end as well, feel free. I'm going to go to this tab that says Master List Example. If you have questions, if we're moving too fast, if you don't know where I went, please chat that in, and we'll take it right in real time. I have the chat up so I can see those. This spreadsheet that we're looking at right here is a list of every nonprofit organization in the state of Montana. I can scroll down and I can see that there are 11,132 nonprofits in Montana. So there's 11,132 rows of data, rows of information. We're going to do some analysis of this because this has it's a lot of raw data. It's going to tell us some things. So this is kind of our example file that we're going to use for most of this course. First thing, though, that you can see is that it's really, really hard to read. And most Excel files, when you open them, when you export them from somewhere or download them from somewhere, they probably look like this, where all of my columns are the same width as far as the ability to see information, and my rows are the same height. So I can see, you can see if I click here in A2, I can see that this cell actually says Absaroka Area Food Bank. I can't see that information here because my column is too small. So first thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that my columns and my rows are large enough that I can see all the information that I need to see. There's a long way to do that and a fast way to do that. The long way, if I go up here, I've got my column names, my A, B, C, D, E. If I go between the letters, go between the columns, you'll see my cursor went to having those two arrows with a line. If I click and drag, I can make this column bigger, which is helpful. And you can see that now, if I do that, now I can see Absaroka Area Food Bank. But now the next one below it, Absaroka Community Foundation, I can't see that whole thing. So I've got to click and drag to make that bigger. And now I can't see the full, Beartooth Backcountry Horseman. It's incorporated. You can see that there's limited utility. Like I can click and drag, but I don't know how big I need to get it so that I can see all the information in all of the rows as we go down. Quick way to get Excel to resize to fit the longest number of characters in that row is to go up here between these columns and just double click quickly. And it's automatically going to resize to fit the longest text string or number string or whatever it is, the longest cell, number of characters in a cell that it needs to fit for that entire column. I could do that for each one of these columns, or I can highlight the entire worksheet. So I click this little caret up here in the corner between the A and the 1. I click that and it highlights the whole stinking thing, the whole darn thing. And now I double click here and it resizes all of my columns for me. And I can come here between any of these rows and double click, double click, and it's going to resize my rows to do the exact same thing. So a quick way to format a worksheet so you can start to see information quickly is to do exactly what I just did, which is highlight the whole thing, go between any of these columns. And so I get this with my cursor, the two arrows, the line, and just double click. And it's going to resize the width of my columns to fit all that information and the height of my rows to fit all that information. Now you can see as I scroll over, I've got much better visibility on all the information that's in here just with a single click. So this is also, if we're talking about how to organize data in a way that I can utilize it for formulas and functions and on Thursday with pivot tables, this is a great way to do it. With my categories, with my data organized in columns, with my category names in row 1, and then the information flowing down from that. This is a great format, probably the preferred format. Some folks I've seen, will incorrectly say, well, I'm going to put name here in row 1, and then move everything, to the right with the names that show up in that. This is how we organize information with discrete columns of data, with the category names right here at the top and the information coming down in rows below that. This is a great table format. Some other quick things on formatting. Most of this can be done with our home tab, on this home tab up here in the toolbar. You can see, well, most of us are probably familiar with just some text formatting, where I can change the font here. Just thinking about it for a second. Change the font, change the size. I can make it bold, underlined, italic. I can change the font color, or I can change the cell color to be highlighted here. And if I highlight, I can click and drag and highlight any amount of information here. And then whatever formatting that I do to that here is going to be in effect. So I can bold, underline these, highlight, unhighlight, change font size, change the font size here with the plus and minus, change the alignment within the cell. So right now I have everything so it's center aligned. It's going to be aligned in the center of each cell. I can make it go to the far left or the right, or I could go move it to the right, but indent it like that. Maybe if I have a subcategory, I want it to be indented below a larger category. I could turn these vertical, counterclockwise. I do all kinds of manipulation of how the information shows up within that cell. A critical thing to focus on though is what we call cell formatting, or the type of cell, the type of data, the data formatting that is showing up within that cell, which is shown right here. This is where you tell Excel, is this text? Is this currency? Is this a date? Is this a zip code? Is this a fraction or a percentage? Because Excel is going to do some math with that. If you say it's a percentage, it's going to ask for it to be in a decimal. If you say that it's a date, it's going to ask for it to be in a certain format. This is a critical aspect to make sure that your cells are formatted with the right type of cell, right type of content that it needs to be to make this work. So let's take, for example, I'm going to come over here, income amount. We know that should be currency. That should be dollars and cents. I'm going to highlight this whole cell, this whole column. You can see that it's set to general, and I'm going to turn it into currency. Now I have it with dollars with 2 decimals behind it. I can get rid of the decimals if I want to by clicking that, or adding more decimals if I would like to. I also have one here that is where is it? Maybe I don't have one in here. We'll get to one on a different tab where we show date fields. Getting Excel to recognize dates and formatting dates can be tricky, but it's important if we're going to manipulate that or want to display that in a certain way. We're going to get to that on the next tab, but this is kind of how we organize data, organize the data in columns, and we can change the formatting with bolds, highlighting, etc. Most of that happens here on the Home tab. A couple other things with lists. We're kind of jumping ahead. Maybe we're jumping ahead to working with lists. This is a list of data, a list of information. We have the ability, oftentimes, so we're looking at a worksheet here of 11,000 rows, right? It's long. There's a lot here, and it's not telling us a lot just by looking at all the information. Sometimes we want to sort by certain information. Sometimes we want to filter certain information out, but we don't want the rest of the data to go away. We just want to be able to filter and see certain bits of information. To do that, we have that here on the Home tab, right here, where we have sort and filter, find and select that information over here on the far right. To sort, we'll start with that. Right now, you can see that this is sorted alphabetically by city, Absaroka first, Acton, Alberton, etc. Let's say I wanted to change that. Let's say I wanted to sort it by maybe Z to A. If I click on the cell that I wanted to sort by, I click sort and filter, sort A to Z. It's already done that. Let's go sort Z to A. Now it's going to flip it on its head, sort it Z to A, just with a click. Or I could do a custom sort, which is going to allow me to do multiple levels of sorting. So I could say, let's sort city by A to Z, and then let's sort by subsection. So subsection is, we have 501c3s. We also have 501c6s, C9s, C12s, et cetera. So that subsection is what comes after the 501. And there's multiple types in here. So we want to sort by that as well. So let's sort by subsection, smallest to largest. So recognize that it's a number, not a letter. So instead of going A to Z, it's saying smallest to largest. Let's do that. So you can do multiple levels of sort. You can see now I have A to Z here, and I've got my subsections here sorted. I could also do a sort by color if I would like to. So let's say that I'm working with my boss, I'm working with a board, working with some community members, and I've got this list. We're working through it, and we have identified, 3 or 4 organizations that we wanted to call out for special interest. I'm going to highlight those. So I'm just going to come up here. I'm going to click on the row, the whole row, and I'm going to highlight these guys and maybe these guys and these 2 guys right here. So I've got 4 records that I want to note. And in this list, I want to make sure that they show up at the top and then have everything else be alphabetical by city name. So I'm going to go back to my city and I'm going to click sort, custom sort. And now my city here, instead of sorting by values, I want to sort by cell color. And I want on top to be yellow. Then I want to sort by city again, by values, by A to Z. So this is my levels of sort. Give me the highlighted things first, and then give me city A to Z. I do that, and there I've got my 4 highlighted cells, and then all 11,000 plus below that in alphabetical order by city. So I can do multiple levels of sort if I need to. I can kind of work this down to just a really granular level, or I could do it an easier way, which is to turn on my filter options. So I'm going to go back to my sort and filter. I'm going to click that button. And now instead of using these sort functions, I'm going to use this filter function right here. And oops, I need to not highlight those 4 cells. Click on filter. You can see nothing happened, except now I have these little drop down arrows on the right side of every column in my whole data set right here. And you can see if I scroll over to the right, that those little drop down arrows show up for every single one of those. This gives me that same functionality I just had with sorting, but now it's within each column. So now if I click this, I get the ability to sort right here, ascending A to Z, descending Z to A. I could sort by cell color if I wanted to right here. Or I could start to filter out information. Now, filtering information doesn't delete information. It just only makes visible the information that you ask it to show. The rest of it's still there. It's just hidden beneath the filter that you've turned on. So you could filter by cell color, and then below that, it's going to give you a list of 1 entry for every piece of data that shows up within this data set right here. So I'm going to do this for city. You can see that it's going to list every city that shows up in this data set, but it's going to show everything only once. So this is where I could say, I just want to see organizations in Absorki and Basin and Baker. So I'm filtering. You can see that the rest of the information is still there. I haven't lost 11,000 rows of information, but I'm now just showing a subset of that. You can tell it's a subset because over here on the left, my rows are now highlighted blue, and you can see that they jump. They go from 1 to 6, from 31 to 191, from 235 to 242, and then the bottom after the data set below that. So you can see that it jumped. There's only showing certain bits of information. This is a great use, like if you're making mailing lists or you're segmenting information out of a larger list, I can filter it down to exactly what I want. And then I can highlight this whole thing. I can copy it, right? Click copy. I can create a new tab and I can paste it. Maybe. Just thinking about it. I might have broken it. Might have frozen. There it is. I can paste it. Now I just have a list of those records that I had filtered for. So now you can see that it's not jumping from row 1 to 6 and from 191 or 235. It's just got those 74 records that I'd filtered by. Now I have a good list. I can give this to my boss. I can give it to a stakeholder. I can give it to the print shop to create a mailing list, whatever it might be. But it was off of a larger filtered list. So this is a good use of kind of using Excel like a database function, where I can create subsets of a larger data set, pull that information out and use it for a different purpose. But I can see if I come back here, I can turn this filter off. I can go back up here and I can say, hey, select all, and all that information comes back because it's all still here. Okay. So that's sorting and filtering on data sets. One other thing that folks want to be able to do in Excel is when they're working in a data set like this, often what happens is, they'll be working in a list like this, and then they start scrolling down to, they're a couple hundred rows in, and they're, a few columns over, and they see this number 0 right here in R174, and they go, I don't know what that is. Because I can't see the header. I don't know what column this is, and I don't know what organization this is tied to. I want to be able to see those even as I scroll down in my worksheet. So this is called freezing panes. Freezing panes means I'm going to freeze an aspect of the worksheet so that as I move down or move to the right, certain information stays where it is. To do that, we're going to go to the View tab right up here at the top. And you can see we've got a couple options right here for freeze panes. One says freeze panes, one says freeze top row, and one says freeze first column. Remember, our columns are vertical, our rows are horizontal. If I say freeze top row, click that. Now, as I scroll down, you can see that my top row is frozen, exactly as it said. Now I can see that this, I'm on my street address, and as I scroll over to R, I can see that that 0 was this asset something title. So that doesn't go away. I can see it still. It's still helpful for me. However, now I can't see what organization this is tied to because I scroll over to the right, which is where this freeze first column button comes in, where it's going to freeze the first column in the data set. So now I can, as I scroll to the right, I can still see the organization name. As I move to the right, it's still frozen. And I can see that as I move here. However, you can see that I now lost my, if you look at my first row, it's now gone. So using these two buttons, I can either freeze my top row or I can freeze my first column. I can't do both unless I use this button that says freeze panes and unfreeze panes. So right now, because I have the column frozen, it says unfreeze panes. But if I click it, it goes back to saying freeze panes. And now I want to be able to show both my top row and my first column. So as I scroll down, I can see my top row. And as I scroll to the right, I can see my first column. I want both. I'm greedy. To do that, I have to use this freeze panes button, and I need to know where to put my cursor to freeze the right panes, to freeze the right row and the right column. I want my cursor, this little box right here, to be one row below the row that I want frozen and one column to the right of the column I want frozen. So I'm going to put it on B2. If I click now freeze panes, now as I scroll down, I have my category names at the top. As I move to the right, I have my organization names on the left. I've got both. I can control which panes are frozen by where I put that cursor. When I click that freeze panes button, it's going to freeze everything above the cursor and everything to the left of the cursor. So I could say, maybe I want to show these highlighted cells the entire time as I scroll down. Maybe I want to see all the way through the address. So I want to see the organization name and the address as I move. So I'm going to go right here to G6 and freeze the panes. And now as I scroll down, I keep my top rows And as I scroll to the right, I keep everything there. There's probably limited utility to this, but you get the point. You can freeze everything above and to the left of wherever your cursor is, whichever cell you're in, when you click freeze panes. And then unfreeze panes makes it go away, brings it back to status quo where everything moves. Questions on that? Can everybody see that? If you have an older version of Excel, these buttons may look a little bit different, but the functionality is there. I've had to prove that one out because I had some folks that would say, well, I couldn't do that on my computer. I promise you can, but it may look a little bit different. Where you're able to freeze different things. The buttons look different to accomplish the same end. One other thing with organizing data, and then we're going to shift gears here, is the ability to hide cells. So right now I have a lot of information here that some of it may be useful, some of it may not. There's a lot of detailed information here, and I don't need it all. So I could filter it. I could filter by the data sets that are within that, but I could also hide entire rows and entire columns if I want to without deleting them. Because again, I find that to be the most helpful if we're trying to use Excel kind of like a database, where I'll just put all the information in and then I'll pull it out as I need to, which means I don't want to delete it. I want to keep it all. I just want to show what I want to see and then let the rest of it exist in the background. Hiding is pretty simple. I'm going to highlight a whole column. I'm going to highlight the EIN number as things here. And then up here right next to the freeze panes, I have a hide button. If I click this, ooh, that was the wrong button, never mind. That was dumb. Undo that. I clicked the wrong hide button. I hid the whole stinking thing. Unhide the workbook. Sorry about that. I'm going to right click and click hide. There we go. That's a much better version of what I was trying to accomplish. So now I just hid column B. So you can see that I went from A to C up here. I could do that with multiple columns. So let's say I also want to hide G through L. I could highlight all these, right click and hide. And now I go from F to M. All the information is still there. It's just hidden. To bring it back, I highlight between the columns that are hidden. I right click and I unhide and they come back. And here I go from between A and C. I right click, I unhide and they come back. I can do the same thing with rows. Let's say that I wanted to hide my highlighted rows right here. I could highlight these 4. I could right click and hide. They're gone. Highlight between 1 and 6. Right click, unhide, they're back. So quick way to manipulate cells, manipulate rows, columns, hide, unhide. You can do the same thing with tabs. If I wanted to hide a whole tab down here, I could right click and hide. It goes away. Right click, unhide, find the one that I hid and bring it back. Okay. So we kind of moved ahead a little bit. We did sorting and filtering data. We covered this. We're going to talk about cell references here in a minute. I want to touch base on one thing I didn't mention. There's a tab within the exercise file called shortcut keys, which is keystrokes on your keyboard that you can use to do things quicker than having to find the command up here in the top navigation, or having to use your mouse even to do it. So, we all know cut, copy, paste. Those are three common things we do in Excel, 3 common things we do in Word or any kind of computer program. So I could, if I wanted to cut data, that means I'm going to take it, I'm going to cut it, I'm going to move it, and it's going to move, the whole thing's going to move. Copy is take that data and make a copy of it somewhere else. And pasting it is putting it where you want it to go. We're familiar with that concept. To cut, I could right click and cut, and then right click and paste. I could also use this top navigation up here where I have cut, copy, and paste. So I could click on a cell, cut it, come over here, paste it. Or I could use some shortcut keys on my computer, like Control plus X. So I'm gonna hold down Control, and I'm gonna hold down X, that cut it. And then Control V, which is 2 to the right of that, is to paste it. So Control V pastes the cut cell that I just had. Control C copies, Control V pastes. If I want to undo something, like I just tried to undo that whole window debacle that I just had, I do Control Z. Control Z, Control plus the Z key will undo. If I want to make something bold, I go Control B, or to unbold it, if it's already bolded, I do Control B again. Italics is Control I, underline is Control U. Here's the one that's important, I think, for us when we're working in Excel. So those shortcut keys work in any Office program you're in, Outlook, Word, Excel, Publisher, any of those, that's gonna work. These next few, though, are specific to Excel and really, really helpful, especially when we're working in larger data sets. So, so we have, our master list example back here that has 30 some columns and 11,000 rows. It can take me a while to sit here and scroll down through those, or to click my little arrow down here in the bottom of my screen and have to scroll through, this many rows. I kind of want to be able to move from top to bottom and from left to right more quickly than that. So if I click Control down, see that Excel just moved me from row 1 down to row 11,132. It's going to automatically move me to the very last row of the data set. So it went from the top to the bottom instantly. To move from the far left to the far right, I go Control right arrow. So I'm using my arrow keys. Control down to the bottom, Control up to the top, Control right to the right side of the data, Control left to the left side of the data. I can start to move around more quickly than having to sit there and scroll, or just hold my arrow key and move all the way over. I can use it more quickly. Sometimes I also want to be able to highlight large data sets without having to click and drag on the whole thing. Control right moves my cursor, moves my cell reference, which cell I'm in. If I go Control Shift right, it's going to highlight from the far left all the way to the far right. And then if I go Control plus Shift plus down, it's going to highlight down to the very bottom. So by going Control Shift right, Control Shift down, you can highlight an entire set of data without having to sit there and drag. Now from here, I could copy this, I could paste it, I could hide it, I could do whatever I want, I've got it. But it's a quick way to manipulate data sets, manipulate your cursor without having to sit there and scroll down a data set that's this big. So Control right, Control down, Control Shift right, Control Shift down. Control right moves it, Control Shift highlights it. Those shortcut keys are here. Those are helpful as you're trying to manipulate data. Okay. We're going to talk about, we're going to work through some cell formats. I want to focus on date references. We're going to start to introduce functions, and we're going to introduce cell references. So we're going to talk about that here for a moment. First thing is date formatting. So you can see that right here, we've got a little budget file. We've got 3 months, some different expense lines here, and some totals. So we've got February, March, and April, and some different expense categories. But February, March, and April are formatted as dates. So you can see that it says February 22, but if I look up here in my formula bar, you can see that it says 2/1/2022. So there's a specific date that it's referencing right here. I could change that. So let's say I want to change it from a date field to a text field. Excel stores dates with unique numeric references. So every date has its own unique number that's happening, that we don't see. So if I change it from a date to something else, I'm going to get this number, 44,593. This one, if I change it from a date to something else, I'm gonna get a different number because it's a different date. So every date has its own kind of unique field that Excel is using to organize itself that you don't ever see. But it's gonna change that date field if you change it from a date to something else. I wanna change this back, so I'm gonna get rid of this. I could say, so now I have a date field that's stored as text. You can see that the format here says text. And I wanna change it to a date. I wanna put in a date of February 2022. If I just type in February 2022, nothing happens. It's still a text field because I haven't changed it to a date. Typically, Excel will recognize dates and change it to a date automatically, but sometimes it doesn't. In this case, it didn't because I changed it to text. If I were to come in here and go 2/1/2022, again, it's going to stay as text. I would have to come up here and click, this is a date. Come on, 2/1/2022. There you go. And you can see that it changed right there. I can change how this is formatted. So if I come up here to my formatting, right now it's a date. I could change it to be a long date, Thursday, February 1st, 2022, or I could use it on, there's a bunch of custom date formats. So if I go to here, more number formats, I have all the different kind of date fields that I could have. So I could have month, day, year, day written out with month written out. I could have month or year, month, day, etc. These are all the different formats that I can tell Excel to display that date field. It doesn't change the fact that the date is just 2/1/2022, which is my formula bar is going to say, but it's going to be displayed in whichever format that I want to show right here. So I'm going to use this one. This is one that I had. And now we're going to do the same thing for March 2022. Remember, I didn't need to change it to a date. And let's go 3/1/2022. We'll change the format of that. And then April was already set up how I wanted it. So this is how you make sure when you're working in Excel, if something's not working right or doesn't look right, especially if it's a date or a number or some kind of a weird format that's not just text, check the format up here and make sure that it's formatted correctly, that if it's a number, it's showing as a number or defined as a number. If it's a date, it's defined as a date. If it's currency, it's defined as currency. If it's percent, it's defined as a percentage, whatever it might be. There's a way, make sure that your formatting is correct up here. Below that, then I've got dollars and cents, which I've already formatted to be currency. So I could type in any number here and it's going to put the dollar sign on it because I've already told it that this is money. This is a currency. So I might change this to be 2,100 and it's going to put that currency, put that dollar sign and the comma in there, even though my formula bar here just says 2,100. So we're going to start to build some very basic formulas that start to give us some summary information of what we're seeing here. So you can see that I've got 3 months worth of data here. I want to get a total on this. I want to see what the total salaries was for my 3 months. To do that, I'm going to use the equal sign. So there's a few ways I can do this. Once I click equals in a cell, that tells Excel that it's time to do some math. We're not just going to display what we see. We're going to have it do some math. In which case there's a few ways now I could add up those 3 cells. First, I could just say equals this cell plus this cell plus this cell. And then I'm going to click enter. And now I have the answer, 6,800, 2,100 plus 2,500 plus 2,200. I could say, it kind of defeats the purpose, but I could just say this equals 2,100 plus 2,500 plus 2,200. That accomplishes the exact same end. But then what happens if I change one of these cells? It's not going to change because I keyed in those numbers in there. I want to create formulas that reference other cells so that if those cells change, my formulas change too. So I'm going to go back, I'm going to redo what I just did. I want this to equal this plus this plus this. It's a quick way to do this, formula. And now if I come back in here and say, March wasn't actually 2,500, it was actually 3,000. I do that, and you can see my number here changed. I'm gonna undo that. It changed from 6,800 to 7,300 because I changed one of the inputs. Change an input, my formula is set to change the output. Now I've got a formula for salaries for these 3 months. I want to include that now for each of these line items moving down. I don't have to do that same formula in rows 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Once I have this formula, if I go to the very bottom right corner of this cell, see how my cursor changes from a white cross to a black cross? Once I have that showing, if I click and drag, it's going to drag my formula all the way down with it. And you can see that it changed. Watch up here in the formula bar where it says B3, C3, D3. As I move down, you can see now it's B4, C4, D4, B5, C5, D5, etc., all the way down to the bottom. Excel, this is called a relative reference. Excel is going to take your formula, and as you copy that formula or move that formula elsewhere in your worksheet, it's going to keep the reference point the same, meaning it's going to look, in this case, I did a formula that said, add up the 3 cells to the left of this cell. As I move that down, it's going to continue to add up the 3 cells to the left of that cell as I go down. It's going to move relative with, that formula is going to move relative to the location in which that formula exists. It's going to move with me. Sometimes though, I don't want that. Sometimes I want a function, a formula to stay on a specific cell, in which case I'm gonna show you how we're gonna do this. So we're gonna do a percent. So I want, to the left of this, I wanna know what percentage my salary is to the whole. So I've got the whole, I've got salaries at 7,300 and I've got my total expense at 11,950. I wanna know what that percentage is. In which case I'm gonna go equals, remember percentage is this number divided by is my backslash, forward slash, divided by the total. 7,300 divided by the total equals 61%. And it found the percentage. I think I had that turned on. So I'm gonna, if I were to have this expressed as a number, it would look like that. And then I would come up here and click this little percentage. That's gonna turn it into a percent. Now though, as I move down, I get a divide by 0. Why do I get a divide by 0? Because my function moved relative to the location of where I am. So you can see if you look at the formula bar here, I'm on E3 divided by E8, which is what I want. E3 divided by E8. As I go down though, now I've got E4 divided by E9. It moved down 1. I can't divide by 0. There's nothing in this cell. I don't want that. I want it to be 11,950. So I could, there's a few ways I could handle this. I could come up here and say, well, I don't want that to be E9. I actually want to change it to be E4 divided by E8. And I could do that all the way down. And I'm going to change it to a percentage. Let's pretend though that this is, 10,000 rows long. I don't want to do that 10,000 times. I want to do it once and then copy it down. So I need to change my cell reference from a relative reference where it moves with me to an absolute reference, where it stays as I move. To change a cell from a relative reference to an absolute reference, I add a $sign before the factor that I want to not move. So I'm going to add a $sign in front of the E. So I'm going to go up into the formula bar, into the function up here. And I'm going to put so it's going to say E3 divided by $E $8. So now I just turned it from a relative reference to an absolute reference. So now as I copy this formula around and paste it around my worksheet, it's going to move the E3 because that's still a relative reference. There's no $signs on that, but it's going to hold the E8 right where it is. So now if I get my little black cross and I drag it down, I get percentages. And you can see if I watch my formula bar up here, E3 divided by E8, E4 divided by E8, E5 divided by E8, etc., all the way down until I have my total, E8 divided by E8. So I'm changing a relative reference to an absolute reference. And it's a way for us to quickly create a formula, get it set with the parameters that I want, and then copy it like crazy. So I don't have to sit there and do that formula 10 times. or 1,000 times. So I'm gonna show you some other relative references. So I've got some of that built in right here. So straight relative reference, I'm referencing right now B3 right here. If I want to copy those top 3 rows that I'm referencing there, so I'm gonna get my little black cross, click and drag, and now it's gonna move with me. B3, C3, D3. A straight absolute reference is going to be with the $sign. So I'm going to go absolute reference, so equals $B, $3, 2100. And now as I click and drag this, I get B3, B3. It stayed in the exact same place. I can have kind of a split absolute relative reference where I can make it hold the row and move the column, or hold the column and move the row. So remember, our columns are alphabetical, our rows are numeric. So if I want to have an absolute row, I'm going to put a $sign in front of the 3, but not in front of the B. Now, if I click and drag over, my rows move, or my columns move. But now as I click and drag down, my rows stay the same. So you can see I went from B3, C3, D3, and as I moved down, I still stayed on row 3 because I told it to hold the row. Don't move the row as I move down. You could do the inverse of that. You could have an absolute column and a relative row. I'm going to put a $sign in front of the B, leave the 3. Now as I drag this to the right, it's going to stay on B, but as I drag it down, it's going to move my rows down. So this is going to be here as an example. You're going to get this file. So if you're trying to figure out, well, how do I make that cell stay where it needs to stay? You can use this as an example. Just remember, a $sign in front of the cell reference that you want to stay, a $sign will make it stay. All right, are you with me on that? I think it's an important thing to know, especially if we move into functions. We start, adding in function names with different cell references, and we want some things to stay and some things to move. Understanding relativity, not the theory of relativity, but understanding relativity for Excel cells and where they are located on the worksheet and making them stay in the same place is an important factor. Any questions on relative versus absolute reference? Does anyone want to see that again? Please use the chat if you do. And I hope you're with me. You're quiet. Okay, thanks, Jamie. So we created this function with equal B3 plus D3 plus, or C3 plus D3. Another quick function that all of us should know is sum. So this is gonna be our first example of a pre-built function in Excel where Excel knows what to do with the name of the thing that we put in. So instead of this saying B3 plus C3 plus D3, I want to say that this equals sum, and then I'm going to add a left parenthesis. Now I'm going to do something different. I'm going to click this little FX button right here, which says insert function. When I do that, I get a call out on the right side that says formula builder. If you're on a PC, this formula builder is going to show up right in the middle of your screen. This is our way to build complicated functions without having to know all the syntax. The syntax is all the things that I have to key in to get the right answer. This is going to do the work for us. The wizard, it kind of takes the guesswork out of it. It allows you to do this work without having to know all the keystrokes. So as soon as I clicked in sum and then left parenthesis, and then clicked formula builder, it says, okay, you're trying to do a sum function. You're trying to add some numbers together. It's right here, it tells me what the sum function does. It adds all the numbers in a range of cells. And then it says, here's the syntax that you need to key in to get this to work. And in this case, it's pretty simple. You go sum, left parenthesis, and then all the numbers after that, either in a range or with commas between the cell references. So I could say from here that this equals this number, B3, and C3, and then add another one, and D3. So in this case, I just built, you can see as I'm using my formula builder here on the right, the formula is being built here in my formula box, my formula window. And now click done, and I have that sum of B3 and C3 and D3, add those three cells together. I could also shortcut this and say, you know, I'm going to get rid of that. And I want my first number not to be a single number or a single cell, but to actually be a range of cells. So to be B3 over to D3, oops, B3 over to D3, I get the same answer, but you can see there's different ways to manipulate this. The point of this though is that we're using the formula builder to do, most of us wouldn't know that this needs to be the specific keystrokes to make this thing work. Sum left parenthesis B3 colon D3 left right parenthesis done. We can use the formula builder to hack our way to getting that. Once I have this, now I can get my little black arrow or my black cross, drag it down, and I have a different function, B3 to D3, sum of B4 to D4, sum of B5 to D5, all the way down to the bottom. So I've got a sum function. Let's say I wanted to do an average function. So I want to get the average amount that shows up here. Average is another good one to work with. In Excel, it's easy to do. So we're going to type in equals average. You can see as I start typing that in, Excel says, okay, you're trying to do a function. Here's all the functions that contain that text. You can see there's a few of them. There are hundreds of functions in Excel. We're just going to kind of scratch the surface on a few. You can explore all of them if you'd like, but you can make them work by typing in the function name, starting with your right parenthesis, and then clicking the formula builder button, the insert function button up here. And then using this little wizard to do the work for you. In this case, it's just like sum. The syntax is just put the numbers in that need to be reflected here. So in this case, I'm going to go equals my numbers. I'm going to go from B3 to D3. And oops, I have that set as text. Sorry, this is from a previous training that I did. Equals average. There we go. And I'm gonna turn that into currency. There we go, 24.33. I can click now and drag that down, and now I've got my average for all these. So a couple quick ones, sum, average, median, if you wanna find the median number, min, max, if I want to find the minimum number, the smallest number in a range, the maximum number in a range. Those are all kind of, the syntax is the same, where you just type in equals min, range of cells, boom, you're done. They get more complicated, and we're going to go through some of those now for our last few minutes here. We're going to start to get into some functions, but I want to make sure that we're okay on all this so far. Absolute references, relative references, and how to at least start functions, where you just click the insert function button and then walk through some syntax. We're going to start doing more of this, but I want to make sure we're on the same page so far. If we're good, if we're not good, let me know in the chat, otherwise I'm going to keep going. Okay. This next function we're going to build is called an if function. So a straight if function, we're gonna build variations of it, but they're pretty powerful. It's kind of a foundational type of function that we can use in Excel to do some analysis for us. An if function says we want to ask Excel to do a logical test, to do some quick math, and if that test is true, give me a response that I stipulate it to do, that I tell it to do. If it's false, give me a different response. So we're going to ask Excel to do some quick work, a quick test. If it's true, return something. If it's false, return something else. So in this case, I have these cells right here for my actuals. This is how much money we spent in these categories. Sorry, that got large. we spent this amount of money in these categories over 3 months. We have this group of cells right here, which I'll highlight in green. This is what we budgeted to spend in those 3 categories. So you can see that some of these are different. Salaries, we said we were gonna budget 6,000, we spent 7,300. Benefits, 500, we actually spent 600, et cetera, all the way down. You can see that there's a variation there. I want Excel to do some work for me to tell me which of these line items are on budget or not on budget. Let's pretend that this isn't 5 lines long, that it's larger, and I want some analysis of what I'm looking at here. So I want to do an if function. I want Excel to tell me if the budgeted amount equals what I actually spent, to tell me that. If the budgeted amount equals something other than what I already actually spent, tell me that. So we're going to use an if function, and we start these functions the exact same way every time. Equals, and then we put in the starting syntax, which in this case is if, and then a left parenthesis. You can see that Excel is giving me the syntax that I have to put in here, but that's still kind of complicated. So I'm going to click my insert function button right up here, and I'm going to bring up my formula builder. So Excel says, okay, you want to use an if function, which means you want to do a test, and you want to return a certain value if that test is true, and a certain value if that test is false. So what's our test? We're trying to compare 2 cells here. So I want to say my test is this H3 equals E3. My budgeted amount equals what I actually spent. My budget amount equals what I actually spent. That's my test. If that test is true, if what I budgeted equals what I actually spent, then I want Excel to tell me on budget. I'm actually going to key that in as the value that I wanted to return. The value could be a number. It could be a series of numbers. Whatever I put in quotes for that value, if true, is what Excel is going to show me if that test comes back as true. If that test comes back as false, I want it to say not on budget. By putting it within quotes, that tells Excel, just put in whatever's within these quotes. It's going to be text, just put it in. I actually may not need quotes on this. I'm going to take those off. I do on some, yeah, I think I do. Because you can see as I'm doing this that it's giving me my result as a preview down here, and you can see that it's going to work. Now I'm going to click done. And I can see that this one, salaries, is not on budget because 6,000 doesn't equal 7,300. But if I click this and drag it down, I can see that I have all of these are not on budget except for one, this one right here, because 300 equals 300. So I just asked Excel to do some analysis for me. A quick if function. Does this equal that? If it does, return a value. If it doesn't, return a different value. It's a quick if. I can use ifs, that's kind of a simple version. Ifs can become really powerful because I can add multiple arguments or multiple tests to drill down to more levels of detail, more levels of information. So in this case, it's sort of helpful for me to know that salaries are not on budget. But what I don't know is, are they over budget or under budget? I know that this one's on budget, which is great, but all the rest of these, I don't know if it's over or under. I just know that it's not on budget. If I'm under, that's good. If it's over, that's bad. So I need more information. So I need a deeper test. I need a more in-depth logical test for Excel to run. Before I do that, are there any questions on the one argument if function? Again, the syntax is what's the test? What's the value of true? What's the value if the test is false? Instead of equals, I could use less than or greater than. So let's do that for a second. So let's say my logical test is that H3 is greater than E3. So my budgeted amount is greater than my actual amount. If that's the case, if my budget is greater than my actual, that means I'm under budget. So if that value is true, I want you to say that I am under budget. If that value is false, I could say, I want you to say that I'm not under budget, because I only have one argument. I can only do one or the other. And now I'm going to click and drag this down, and I can see that I have one that's under budget and the rest are not under budget. One of these is on budget, and the rest must be over. So now that told me something else. I could also do less than. So I could say that H7, or let's go back to H3. I could say that H3 is less than E3, in which case my budget is less than my actual. So if that's true, if my actual is bigger than my budget, that means I must, if that's true, I'm over budget. If it's false, I'm not over budget. Here I'm over budget. There you go. So you can see that our inputs are changing and our outputs are changing as we change the variables, we change the tests that we're asking Excel to do. All three of those tests that we just did have kind of limited utility, right? Like it tells me something, but each of them by themselves doesn't tell me the whole thing. I want one argument that tells me the whole thing, whether it's under budget, on budget, or over budget. To do that, I have to add another argument to this. So I'm going to say equals if left parenthesis, and we're going to bring up our formula builder, excuse me. And now I want to start on one end of the spectrum and work my way to the other end. It doesn't matter which side I start on. I'm just going to start on one end and work towards the other. So I want to say my first logical test is that H3 is less than, it's greater than, start on that side, E3. So my budget is greater than my actual. If that's the case, if my budget is greater than my actual, that means I'm under budget. My actual is smaller than my budget. If that is the case, my value, if true, is that I'm under budget, in which case I could type in under budget here. Maybe I'll do that just like we have been. Under budget. And type. There we go. But now instead of giving me another value, if it's false, or typing in on budget, I need another argument. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to do another argument here for my logical test. So for my logical test, this is going to equal if, and I always mess this up. I'm gonna go up into my syntax up here. Under budget, if it's false, I'm gonna go if, and now my logical test, now we're gonna do equals. So I'm gonna say, so I just said if it's under, if my actual is under my budget, it's under budget. And now I want you to run another test and say if that's false, run another test that says my budget equals my actual, in which case that value is on budget. And now I've done two tests, taking care of two arguments. I only have one that's left over. So if it's not under and it's not on, it has to be over. So if the value is false, has to be over budget right here. Square up my parentheses, away we go. Over budget, over budget, over budget, on budget, under budget, over budget. So I just did a 2-argument if statement. You could have an if statement that has 20 arguments. As long as you start on one side and work of the argument spectrum and work your way to the other, you can have as many of these as you want, where you're kind of a process of elimination, telling Excel, if it's this, give me this answer. If it's not that, do another test. If it's that, give me that answer. If it's not that, give me another test, all the way till you have all the range of possibilities exhausted. And then that last value will be, if it's none of those, got to be this. So that's a way to do a multi-argument if statement. That's a bit higher order, but you have an example here now that you can use if you want to see how to do that, and we have the video as well. But just know, follow the syntax. Do the test. If it's true, give me that. Do another test. If that's true, give me that until you've exhausted those possibilities. The reason I brought up if statements is, first of all, because they're powerful, and they can be used in a lot of different ways for you to start to get some analysis and some insights to data that you have. The other reason that we have them in here is because there's a number of variations of if statements that we're going to start on Thursday, where we're going to tell Excel, run an if statement, run a test or multiple tests, and then instead of just giving me a value, if that's true or if that's false, do something else. So if, as an example, find everywhere where you find a city name that says Baker, and then count how many of those instances you find. Or find where you see the city name Baker, and then go to these cells over here and add up all the values and give me the total of those. So there's variations of the if function, count if, sum if, average if, min if. There's all these variations that we're going to focus on that have that same foundation of run a test and then do something else and do some analysis. You can do some really high order analysis on things to make things work. That's what we have. Let's see, I have about 6 minutes. So how can I best use this? So that's where I have over here. We'll focus on count if, some ifs, some things like that. We're going to try to breeze through these things pretty quickly on Thursday, so we can get to visualizations and pivot tables. That's where we start to do some really high level analysis by using that if foundation of a logical test. All right, I've got about 5 minutes. I'm going to do a couple things that I can do quickly. So sometimes we have a need to manipulate data or manipulate text rather, to take a text string, maybe it's a name, in this case it's a full name, first name space last name, and break it up, find a different way to show that information. So quick way, we're going to try to work through these for 5 minutes. If I work quick, we can go through this. One of the functions that's really easy for breaking up a larger text string is called left. So I'm going to type in equals left parenthesis, go to my insert function right here. Left returns the specified number of characters or letters or numbers, whatever they are, from a text string starting on the left side. So in this case, I want to separate my first name. Which one am I doing here? I'm doing zip 5. Sorry, I want to separate my zip code. So I've got the zip code name where I've got zip code, the 5-digit zip code, dash, and then the 4 after that. I just want the 5 digits right there. So in this case, I'm going to go with left. I'm going to click into my zip code. Whoops, equals left. The text that I want it to look at is my zip code. And it's going to start on the left side, and it's going to move over the number of characters that I tell it to. In this case, we know that a zip code is 5. So I'm going to say move over 5 characters and return those 5 characters that you see. Click done. Drag this down. And now I've got the 5-digit zip code right there. So I'm able to break some text up. If you have a name, as long as the name is the same length, as long as all of the names are the same length, you can break it up by using left and then the number of characters, the number of letters that you want to display, or numbers that you want to display. Right does the same thing from the right side. Starts on the right, moves to the left, and then returns the number of characters that you specify. So in this case, I'm going to do equals right, insert function. The text is my zip, and the number of characters is 4. I want to return that kind of postfix after the zip code 5. And I have the post. Limited utility, you can see there's probably some use for it. What I want to make sure we hit before we leave, though, is this idea of being able to separate names, separate a full name first name space last name into multiple columns. People always are like, how do I get this in alphabetical order when the last name is stuck in the middle of that darn cell? We want to tell you how to do that. We're going to use a function. It's not actually a function. It's a command up here at the top called text to columns. So I'm going to take my whatever cells that I want to copy over and separate into multiple columns. I want to separate my first name from my last name. So I want to take the cells here and I want to Control C copy. And then I want to come over here and I want to paste it just like that. But now I'm going to keep them highlighted and I'm going to go to data and I'm going to click text to columns. Text to columns says I want to take a text string and I want to break it up into as many columns as I specify or I tell it to do. It's going to bring up a wizard, just like our formula builder, that takes the work out of this. The first question is always, is the text that you're highlighting, that you're asking to break up, is it delimited or is it fixed width? Fixed width means, are they all the same width, the same number of characters? In which case you need to specify the number of characters. Most often it's not fixed width, it's delimited, which means that there's some kind of a character within that text string that you want to use to break up that text string. As like, once you see this character, start a new column for everything after it. So we're going to use delimited. This is your default. You don't have to change it. You're just going to click next. And now it says, okay, you've got a delimiter in here. What's the character that you want to use to break this text string up into multiple columns? It could be, they've got some common options here, tab, semicolon, comma, space, other. So I could say, you know, every time you see a capital A, use that to break this text string up. It's not what I want, but you can use any character you want. In this case, what's the one thing that's common between my first name and my last name? It's a space, right? It always goes first name, space, last name. So I want to click space, and you can see my preview just did what I wanted it to do, where it's going to separate my first name from my last name because there's a space between everyone's first name and last name. Now I'm going to click next. I'm not going to worry about the formatting. I'm going to click finish. And now you can see that I just separated my first name, my full name, into first name and last name in 2 columns. And now I can sort this. I can turn it into AZ. I can do whatever I want to do to this information. And I did that before 7 o'clock. I wanted to get there. Actually, I wanted to get through the rest of this worksheet, but that's close enough. This is really helpful for folks that work with lists of names of people or addresses or things that there's a bunch of information slammed together in one cell. And it's like, I need to be able to manipulate this more than I am right here. This is how you can separate it and get it where you want it to be. Rita, yes. So Rita asked, can you do those steps one more time? Yeah, I'm going to do the whole thing one more time. We are at time. We're at 7 o'clock. So if you need to go, obviously you could have gone whenever you want to, but we're not going to cover anything else. And we're going to pick this up from here on Thursday and then just keep moving. And then you'll get this whole file after Thursday's class. So to move this over, I need to actually copy it or make another copy somewhere else, paste information in, and then use the text to columns feature to break it up into multiple columns. So I'm going to highlight the cells that I want to create somewhere else into multiple columns. In this case, it's my name, these names, first name, space, last name. And I'm going to copy it. So I could go Control C, I could go right click, copy, I could go to home, copy, whatever I need to do, I can do that. Now I'm going to come over here to first name, which is where I want my far leftmost column to start. I'm going to start there and I'm going to paste it. To paste it, I could go Control V. I could go home, paste. I could right click, paste, but I'm going to get the information there. So you can see that it's still in the exact same format that I had it. It's full name and it's all slammed together into one column. To separate it now, I'm going to go up to data and text to columns. Data, text to columns. When I click that, it's going to bring up a convert text to columns wizard, just like our formula builder wizard. That's going to just answer the questions and it's going to do the work for us. There's 2 options. One is delimited, one is fixed width. Most often we're using delimited, which is where delimited means that there's a delimiter somewhere within that text string within each cell that says when you see this character, make a new column after that character. So I'm going to use delimited and I'm going to click next. In this case, my default that it was already turned on was the space, but you could use any kind of a delimiter. So you may have, maybe it's an address where you've got between your address and your city, or between your city and your state, you've got a comma. So you could say, if that's the case, my delimiter is a comma. So everywhere you see a comma, break up the text at that point and create a new column between the comma. It could be a letter. It could be whatever it is that you have that's common within all those cells. In this case, our delimiter is a space because there's always a space between my first name and my last name. So I'm going to click space. You can see as it's previewing here that that's what's happening. It's separating it between first name and last name. I'm going to click next. Now it's going to ask me how I want to format the columns. So remember, this is where we could use dates or text or number, or whatever it might be. You don't have to do it here. You could format it as we did before. So I usually leave that alone, and then you just click finish. And it took that information and it bumped the information over where my columns were created, and it created a separate column for my last name. So now I have first name in one column, last name in a different column. And from here, I could say, let's sort this by A to Z. There it is. Now I've got alphabetical by last name list. Great. Thanks for sticking with me. If you have specific things in Excel that, if something didn't make sense, if you have specific things that you'd like to cover next time, briefly, you don't have a lot of time, but if there's something you want to cover, make sure we get to, or any specific needs for Thursday, please email Dara. I'll put you down the spot, Dara, and she can email me. And if you'd like to set up time with me, my email is in the chat here. I'm happy to answer a question via email or hop on a Zoom call and work through it that way as well. Thanks for your time. Thanks for giving us your evening. And I look forward to seeing you here on Thursday as well.
Thank you, Adam. I appreciate your time. I think we all do. As always, I learn something every time you do this. So greatly appreciated. We look forward to seeing everybody again on Thursday, and I will have the recording available probably sometime tomorrow morning.
Thanks all.
Good night.